This is a continuation of a study of the book of Acts. This lesson beginning with chapter 26. Paul is before the Jewish king Agrippa, who of course had been appointed by the Roman governor. Verse 1. Then Agrippa said unto Paul, Thou art permitted to speak for thyself. Then Paul stretched forth the hand and answered him. He held forth those bonds, those chains too. I think myself happy, King Agrippa, because I shall answer for myself. This because I shall answer for myself this day before thee, touching all the things whereof I am accused of the Jews. So he is going to represent himself here and defend himself as against rather these persons who have accused him of violating Jewish law. 3, especially because I know thee to be expert in all customs and questions which are among the Jews, wherefore I beseech thee to hear me patiently. Agrippa would have been very familiar with the Jewish law and with the customs, unlike these Roman governors who considered the entire religion mere superstition. 4. My manner of life from my youth, which was from the first among mine own nation at Jerusalem, know all the Jews. He is a Jew for where he lives. He is not of the house of Judah. We learn in Romans 11 that he is a Benjamite. 5. Which knew me from the beginning, if they would testify that after the most straightest sect of our religion I lived a Pharisee. I was Pharisee. He had been taught at the feet of Gamaliel, and he was a Pharisee. He could read and write Hebrew, and he was very, very familiar with all of the Old Testament. 6. And now I stand and am judged for the hope of the promise made of God unto our fathers. And what was that promise? It was life after death. And that's why he is being judged, because he was teaching Jesus, and that Jesus resurrected. 7. Unto which promise our 12 tribes, all 12 of Israel, instantly serving God day and night, hope to come, for which hope's sake King Agrippa, I am accused of the Jews. And what was the hope? The hope was none other than the promise of the Messiah. 8. Why should it be thought a thing incredible with you that God should raise the dead? 9. I verily thought with myself that I ought to do many things contrary to the name of Jesus of Nazareth. Paul has been the worst enemy of the early church. 10. Which thing I also did in Jerusalem, and many of the saints did I shut up in prison, having received authority from the chief priest. And when they were put to death, I gave my voice against them. He was against the early church. He dragged people out and put, as he said, put his voice to it when they were put to death. 11. And I punished them off in every synagogue, and compelled them to blaspheme, and being exceedingly mad against them, I persecuted them even unto the strange cities. He went out of Jerusalem, was on his way to Damascus when the bright light struck him down on the road, and Jesus spoke with him. Whereupon, 12, as I went to Damascus with authority and commission from the chief priests, it was the head of the church who sent me to persecute these Christians, he is saying. 13, at midday, O king, a light from heaven above the brightness of the sun, shining around about me and them which journeyed with me. And this light was in the middle of the day, a bright light that outshone the sun. 14, and when we were all fallen to the earth, I heard a voice speaking unto me, and saying in the Hebrew tongue, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. That has a rather double meaning. A prick would be like a stick with a nail in it to go to a cow or any livestock. And if the animal kicked back against it, it would just make the injury from the nail more. Think also about a compass. You put a sharpened part down and you put a load of pencil in the other side, and if you hold that steady, then you will draw a perfect circle, a compass. And if you mess with that prick or that part of the compass that is the center, then you will not have a true circle. And the message here is, Paul, you are messing with God's plan. 15, and I said, Who art thou, Lord? And he said, I am Jesus whom thou persecutest. Jesus himself spoke to Paul, and Paul was chosen to carry out a good work. 16, but rise and stand upon thy feet, for I have appeared unto thee for this purpose, to make thee a minister and a witness, both of these things which thou hast seen, and of those things which I will, in the which I will appear unto thee. So we have seen and we will see that Jesus appears to Paul, and Paul is always under the guidance and the help of the triune God. 17, delivering thee from the people and from the Gentiles, unto whom now I send thee. He said, I stopped you from going in there, and now I'm sending you to the Gentiles. And Paul was sent. He spent a long missionary journey traveling through Asia Minor. 18, to open their eyes and to turn them from darkness to light, and from the power of Satan unto God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and inheritance among them which are sanctified by faith that are in me. So he is saying that Jesus told him these persons are worthy and are to be offered forgiveness and acceptance into the kingdom. Whereupon, O King Agrippa, I was not disobedient unto the heavenly vision. God himself, God the Son. 20, but showed first unto them of Damascus and at Jerusalem and throughout all the coast of Judea, and then to the Gentiles, that they should repent and turn to God and do works meant for repentance. 21, for these causes the Jews caught me in the temple and went about to kill me. Now, what was he doing in the temple? we learn that he was in the temple finishing the purification rites as a Nazarite, and he was in there to offer an alms, an offering. To drag a person in that act from the temple, that was against Jewish law. He was not doing anything wrong in the temple. 22, having therefore obtained help of God, I continue unto this day, witnessing both to the small and the great, saying none other things than those which the prophets and Moses did say should come. But what was Paul teaching? Was he teaching something that man had written? No, he was teaching the law, the Pentateuch, the book of Moses, and then the next book after those five, Joshua, the first prophet. He would have been discussing Psalm 22, which outlines all the events of the crucifixion. He would have been quoting passages from Isaiah, promising that a virgin would conceive. He would have been using many scriptures to show these persons that the promise of the Messiah was made and fulfilled. And of course, as I mentioned, he was a student who had learned the Old Testament thoroughly. 23, that Christ should suffer and that he should be the first that should rise from the dead and should show light unto the people and unto the Gentiles. 24, and as he thus spake for himself, Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, thou art beside thyself, much learning doth make thee mad. Now Festus would not have understood any of this because he was a Roman governor. 25, but he said, Paul speaking, I am not mad, most noble Festus, but speak forth the words of truth and soberness. 26, for the king knoweth of these things before whom I speak freely. Yeah, the king knows. He's a Jew. He's Jewish. He knows the beliefs. He knows the religious system. For I am persuaded that none of these things are hidden from him, for this thing was not done in a corner. It wasn't hidden. It was open. 27, King Agrippa, believest thou the prophets? I know that thou believest. 28, then Agrippa said unto Paul, almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian. Why would Agrippa not be fully persuaded? What would happen to Agrippa if he chose to be a Christian? Well, he would no longer be the Jewish king. It would cost him the kingship, and that notoriety and that money meant more to Agrippa. And Paul said, I would to God that not only thou, but all that hear me this day were both almost and altogether such as I am, except these bonds. I wish that all of you could know what I know, except for having chains on my hands, he's saying. 30. And when he had thus spoken, the king rose up, and the governor, and Berenice, that's Agrippa's wife, and they sat with them. 31, and when they were gone aside, they talked between themselves, saying, This man doth nothing worthy of death or of bonds. We don't have a reason to hold this person. Not Roman law, not Jewish law. 32, to complete the chapter. Then said Agrippa unto Festus, This man might have been set at liberty if he had not appealed to Caesar. Paul appealed to Caesar as a Roman citizen, and once he made that appeal, it had to be carried out. Paul is using credentials, several of them. He is a Roman citizen because his father, a Benjamite, was born free as a Roman. His mother and his grandmother were Hellenist Hebrews who could speak Greek. He knew the Greek language, although it was street Greek. He knew the Roman language, Latin. He knew the Hebrew, could read and write Hebrew. He could claim to be a Jew as a resident of Judea. And he, of course, had the claim of having Roman citizenship through his father. Chapter 27, the trip, beginning the trip to Rome. And when it was determined that we should sail into Italy, they delivered Paul and certain other prisoners unto one named Julius, a centurion of Augustus's band. This was a hand-picked person who is going to be over Paul on this entire journey. And Julius means soft-haired. Verse 2, and entering into a ship of Adramyttium, we launched, meaning to sail the coast of Asia, one Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, being with us. And the us includes Luke, who did Paul's scribing work. 3. And the next day we touched at Sidon, that's next to Tyre, Tyre. Sidon was a fishing village. Tyre was a little rock island and was a commercial trading place, and it was never conquered until some persons built a road out to it, and that was the end of it. And God said that it would never be again, and it isn't. And remember that Satan, one of his names is Prince of Tyre, and Tyre means rock. The point being that Satan is false rock, not the real rock. And the next day we touched at Sidon to finish this verse 3, and Julius courteously entreated Paul and gave him liberty to go into his friends to refresh himself. So Julius, even though he is over Paul, is allowing him liberty. And when we had launched from thence, we sailed under Cyprus, because the winds were contrary. And this means going under. They went on what would have been on their route, the bottom of the island, rather than going up and around the top. They went around the bottom and up on the other side. 5. And when we had sailed over the sea of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia. 6. And there the centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing into Italy, and he put us therein. This would have been a big grain ship, an Egyptian ship, very likely hauling a cargo of grain. 7. And when we had sailed slowly many days and scarce were come over against Cnidus, the wind not suffering us, we sailed under Crete and over against Salome. Again, they went on the underside of this island rather than around over the top, as it top and bottom, as it related to the direction of their journey. 8. And hardly passing it, came unto a place which is called Fair Havens, nigh whereunto was the city of Lycia. This would have been late September when they were coming into this part. Now, when much time was spent, and when sailing was now dangerous because the fast was now already past, Paul admonished them. That's how we know it's late September. The fast we are speaking of is the fast of the Feast of Tabernacles. 10. And said unto them, Sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with hurt and much damage, and only the lading and ship, but also of our lives. So Paul's warning them, perhaps we'd better stay here in Fair Havens. 11. Nevertheless, the centurion believed the master and the owner of the ship more than the things which were spoken by Paul. So Paul was not listened to. 12. And because the haven was not commodious to winter in, it was exposed, the more part advised to depart thence. Also, if by any means they might attain to Phoenice, and there to winter, which is a haven of Crete, on the island of Crete. So they're looking to go there, and lieth toward the southwest and the northwest. 13. And when the south wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their purpose, loosening thence, they sailed close by Crete. 14. But not long after, there arose a tempestuous wind called Euroclydon, hurricane. They're in the middle of a hurricane. 15. And when the ship was caught and could not bear up to the wind, we let her drive. We just let the ship move without sails. And running under a certain island, which is called Clauda, we had much work to come by the boat. Now, the boat would have been a lifeboat. 17. And when they had taken up the used helps, undergirding the ships, and fearing lest they should fall into the quicksands, struck sail, and so were driven. So there were shallows there and places where they could go aground, and the quicksands that would be off the African coast, and it would be unfortunate to get into that. Now, those undergirding, those helps are like cables that would be like a belt to hold that ship together. It's, remember, made of wood boards. 18. And we, being exceedingly tossed with the tempest the next day, they lightened the ship. So they're going to begin to unload some things. 19. And the third day we cast out with our own hands the tackling of the ship. So they're throwing off extra gears and extra things that would have to do with the sailing of the vessel. The first thing off would have been that. 20. And when neither sun nor stars in many days appeared, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope that we should be saved was taken away. Now you're going to see that Paul has hope because Jesus himself has told him he will be going to Rome, and he knows that he will. Now, no sun, no stars, navigation. That is how they could tell direction and where they were. And 21. But after long abstinence, Paul stood forth in the midst of them and said, Sirs, you should have hearkened unto me, and not have loosed from Crete. You should have stayed in Fairhaven, he's saying, and to have gained this harm and loss. 22. And now I exhort you, be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. He's saying, going to lose the ship, but no one will lose his life. 23. For there stood by me this night the angel of the Lord, whose I am and whom I serve. He knows this, but the angel, the very presence of the Lord, is how he has this detail about the outcome of this voyage. 24, saying, Fear not, Paul, thou must be brought before Caesar, and lo, God hath given thee all them that sail with thee. Wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe God, and it shall even be as he told me. 26. Howbeit we must be cast upon a certain island. 27. But when the 14th night was come, and we were driven up and down in Adria, about midnight the shipmen deemed that they drew near to some country, and sounded and found it 20 fathoms. And when they had gone a little further, they sounded again and found it 15 fathoms. Now, explaining these two verses, they could hear waves crashing. They could understand that land is nearby. Now, the sounding and 20 fathoms, they would have used a rope with periodic knots to measure the fathoms or the depth. And as you can see, it was 20, and then it went to 15, so the water is getting more shallow. 29. Then fearing lest we should have fallen upon rocks, they cast 4 anchors out in the stern and wished for the day. So rather than chance crashing in there into rocks, they dropped anchors and waited for daylight. 30. And as the shipmen were about to flee out of the ship, when they had let down the boat into the sea under color, as though they would have cast anchors out of the foreship. Now, what's happened here is that you had some persons who were going to get in the lifeboat and take the lifeboat out. Paul knows full well that they couldn't survive in that water, and that color there, that word color means pretense. They pretended they were going forward to drop an anchor when they absolutely intended to get in that lifeboat and leave. (31) Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, "Except these abide in the ship, you cannot be saved." We can't let these persons go. Then the soldiers cut off the ropes of the boat and let her fall down off. They just cut the ropes and let the lifeboat go. 32. And while the day was coming on, Paul besought them all to take meat, saying, "This is the 14th day that you have tarried and continued fasting, having taken nothing." The ship was rocking too bad. Anything that they had would have sloshed out, and they could, of course, not had galley fires to do any cooking in this hurricane. 34. Wherefore I pray you to take some meat, for this is for your health, and for there shall not a hair fall from the head of any of you. He's been promised that by the Lord. 35. And when he had thus spoken, he took bread and gave thanks to God in presence of them all, and when he had broken it, he began to eat. Then they were all of good cheer, and they took some meat, some food. And we were in all the ship 216 souls, 276 persons aboard, and not one will be lost. And when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship and cast out the wheat into the sea. So they've unloaded now all the gears, all the extra ropes or whatever used to sail the ship, and now they've dumped the grain. 39. And when it was day, they knew not the land, but they discovered a certain creek with a shore, into which they were minded, if it were possible, to thrust in the ship. So there's a creek there, and there's going to be a beach and a way in to get onto land. 40. And when they had taken up the anchors, they committed themselves into the sea and loosened the rudder bands and hoisted up the mainsail to the wind and made toward shore. So they have put up the sail, and so that they can use the wind power to move into this creek and this beach here on this island. 41. And falling into a place where two seas met, they ran the ship aground, and the forepart stuck fast and remained unmovable, but the hinder part was broken with the violence of the waves. So the ship has broken asunder in two. 42. And the soldiers' counsel was to kill the prisoners, lest any of them should swim out to escape. 43. But the centurion, willing to save Paul, kept them from their purpose, and commanded that they which could swim to cast themselves first into the sea and get to land. So they were told swimmers go first. 44. To complete this chapter, and the rest, some on boards and some on broken pieces of the ship. And so it came to pass that they escaped all safe to land. Not a single one aboard the ship was lost. And of course, they are on what was then called the island of Melita. Today, the name of the island is Malta. One chapter remains in the study of this book. The next lesson will cover the very last chapter, chapter 28, and a short recap of the entire book of Acts. This video is a volunteer outreach of the United Methodist Church in Essex, Missouri.